All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here, talk about our project on uses of plants. It's a pretty simple project, but I just wanted to go over a few highlights about it. It is an important chapter, so I wanted to take a few minutes, just talk about a couple of important highlights as it relates to the lesson, and then just really briefly go over what the expectations for the project are. As some of you have turned them in, just missing a couple of points, so I want to make sure that you have all that information in one place. So, really, when we talk about the uses of plants, we need to first talk about, what are the objectives of the lesson. Really, throughout this entire unit, you want to make sure that you're able to recognize the contribution that plants have to our world food supply, especially as we move into the last two units of the year. Um, Really, we talk again about, environments and ecosystems and how plants are going to relate to that. Um, Being able to identify the methods for propagation of plants, um, and then obviously understanding and being able to list some commercial uses for plants, specifically as they relate to you as a consumer. So um, those really are the objectives of the project. So um, what we need to discuss are really just some highlights here. If someone said to you, could you name a fruit? Obviously, your first responses would be, I could say an apple, an orange, a grape, a pear, a peach. Okay, but maybe you didn't know that nuts and grains are also fruits as well. Okay, so they come from the fruits of cereal grasses like wheat and rice and corn. Okay, and when you look at it and you think about it, wheat is really the world's most widely grown food crop. So with that, the origination of this crop occurred many years ago as a result of really the crossing, the selective breeding of wild grass species that we now find in the Middle East. So these kernels then can be ground to produce flour for baking, or the creation of pastas. So a huge economic importance for consumers. Okay, others like rice. Okay, it's a grain that's eaten by more than half of the world as a main dish, especially over in Asia. Corn. Corn was cultivated nearly 7,000 years ago, and it's now the most widely grown crop in the U.S. Not just for its economic importance in the food commodity, but also now when we look at using corn for ethanol production for fuel efficient vehicles. Sugar. The world's natural sugar comes from either sugar cane or sugar beets. Okay, so I would encourage you to to learn a little bit more about the history of that and how that relates to us as a consumer, especially with our food supplies. The majority of them being based, as sugar. Okay. Um, with this and with foods, there are individuals out there that are concerned that the world appears to be nearing a state of mass food shortages. So as populations explode across the world, we approach 7 billion people. Forecasts are out there that, we could have a worldwide starvation epidemic. Okay. So we need to be, again, diligent, just like we are with when we talked about, the renewable and non-renewable resources. We need to talk about, global food chains on a perspective um, of conservation, and wide use in terms of how we're going to keep the global food supply, moving forward. And that comes along with plant propagation. Okay, plants being able to reproduce naturally, and then when methods of asexual reproduction are there, sometimes they need human assistance. Okay, so methods like layering and cutting, and grafting are examples. Okay. Um, but in addition to that, really, really, your lesson does a really nice job talking about other uses of plants. Okay, besides obviously the obvious, which is oxygen and food. Plants are used to build things, lumber from trees, wood for fuel, paper that we take so much for granted in terms of school. So, excuse me. So those are important things to think about. So I would encourage you to go back into your lesson. I would encourage you to go back and look at the charts that your lesson has. Great place to start. But let's get into and talk a few minutes about the project. Real simple, easy project. Doesn't really require a major amount of research. Just requires you to kind of think about the uses of plants from an economic standpoint in your home, and then synthesize that all that information that you learned in the lesson. So the project asks that plants are used for hundreds of things. In your house alone, you can probably look around and see where plants have been used. The goal of the project is for you to identify the uses of plants in your home. So the first thing you're going to do is I want you to go around your house, okay? And I want you to think about the objects that are in your house or the products that you might find or use or any other items where plants were involved in the production of that item, okay? And I want you to give me a list of 20 items, okay? So you're going to give me 20 things that are around your house that have an origin from plants, that have come from the production of plants, okay? And then the second part to this is that after you've thought about those, I want you to respond to the question, okay? And I want you to think about these two questions in detail. What happened if plants no longer existed on the planet? Okay, so if plants, a mass scale extinction of all plants on the planet, think about it from the perspective of primary productivity. And remember, plants are primary producers. They make up the bottom of every food chain and every food web. So think about it from that perspective. First. And then the second part to that question that goes along with that is if plants no longer existed on Earth, how would your life or your family's life or humans in general, how would our lives be different? Okay. There's no real right or wrong answer with this part of the question. This is really asking you to just synthesize what you've learned as it relates to how plants are important to you and to your family specifically. Okay, so think about that when you're actually looking through your household items that you have derived from plants. You know, how would your lives be different if those things weren't there anymore? Okay, so that's the project. If you have any questions, I'll certainly be around during this week in the VO to answer them. If you need any help, email, give me a call, or swing by the VO. Be more than happy to help you. And we're going to be back here next week, moving on to a new unit with some new topics to cover a new project. So have a great week, everybody.